All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome. As you're coming in, I'd ask that you please stand for the presentation of the colors and remain standing for the national anthem by Darlene Williams from our Office of International Affairs. The colors are presented by the Military District of Washington's Joint Color Guard. Please stay standing.
Colors, hope. Colors, present arms.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we held at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? Amen.
Right shoulder, arms.
All right, please be seated. So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the SEC's 2026 Memorial Day Commemoration. My name is Adam Anisich, and I'm the chair of the SEC's Veterans Committee. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this year's ceremony, where we're going to reflect on the service and the sacrifice of those who've given their life in support of America's freedoms. We have a great program lined up for you today, including remarks from Chairman Atkins, from our own Lieutenant Colonel Luke Pizicki in Enforcement, who recently returned from a deployment. It will lead us in a moment of silence. We have the Interagency Veterans Advisory Council Chairman Lloyd Calderon, whose plane was actually delayed in Dallas. He shared his video remarks with me late last night. We're going to hear from Major Ken McDonald, a Marine who served in the 1950s. We've got a wonderful panel discussion with SEC veterans and reservists, and we're going to conclude with Lieutenant Colonel Keith Cassidy, who will cut the cake and recognize the military's, some of the military service's 250th birthdays. So this is our first large-scale event since 2019, and I really want to recognize the Veterans Committee team for pulling this together, as well as our leadership from Chairman Atkins, Commissioners Ueda and Peirce, our division office directors, including John Moses, who's joining our panel today. So welcome, John, and really everyone around the commission for their support of the veterans community here at the SEC. It's truly an employer of choice for veterans and service members alike. In preparing for today's event, I was reminded of the incredible service-oriented activities that have been sponsored here since we last met. We've had multiple rooftop barbecues. We've had Veterans Committee providing hot dogs to all staff. We've had a Toys for Tots campaign led most recently by Stephen Tenser in New York. We've had remembrances, service events, the list goes on. And I think I speak for everyone here when I say thank you for hosting those events, but also what we do there speaks to the service orientation of people at the SEC, service that we're going to hear more about shortly. So if you're interested in becoming more involved with the Veterans Committee, please feel free to reach out. Maybe it's just getting added to our listserv or popping in for a quarterly meeting. There's a lot of really low stress ways to engage with the community, and everyone is welcome. You don't have to be a veteran. The SEC Veterans Committee is also part of a larger mosaic of military, of veteran, and of military spouse communities across the government. In fact, there's over 150 departments and agencies that comprise the Interagency Veterans Advisory Council, where we support OPM and the administration on issues affecting veterans, reservists, military spouses, who are also federal civilian employees. So this type of service to others spans across the government, and we're so pleased that you've decided to join us for today's event, including those of you on the webcast today. I think I'll close by sharing that my co-leaders, the Battle Buddies, specifically Cynthia Sargent, is unable to speak at today's event due to some other commitments, but sends her regards to you all. And between her, Alethea, you all play a critical role at the Veterans Committee, and we want to recognize their contributions. I think Mark Fear here in the audience, I really appreciate his instrumentality in organizing today's event. So thank you all. With that, let me turn it over to the man who truly needs no introduction, a true veteran of the America's capital markets, the 34th chairman of the SEC, the Honorable Paul Atkins. Sir, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Adam, and for organizing all of this, and you and your colleagues. This is a wonderful ceremony and a wonderful moment to recognize those who have served so well. And also, thank you very much for that wonderful, very touching rendition of the national anthem. So thank you. That was really wonderful to hear that we have such talent in the staff. So it's an honor to join you all today as Memorial Day draws near. This annual holiday is the most solemn occasion, the one that stokes within us deep gratitude, no less. For on it, we commemorate our fallen soldiers and remember their great courage. This year's ceremony, of course, is heightened by the fact that our nation is on the cusp of its 250th anniversary, a milestone that's made possible only by the undying loyalty and sacrifice of generations of American heroes. I should also like to use this moment to extend my special thanks to our colleagues who bear titles beyond those of their work here at the SEC, the veterans and service members across the agency, many of whom are gathered with us now. Your selfless commitment to defending our God-given rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness demands our highest honor and most sincere gratitude. These ideals of devotion and sacrifice have been on my mind as we prepare to observe Memorial Day, and as we continue our agency's tradition of engaging with current service members, including visiting Marines and sailors next week at Camp Pendleton when Keith Cassidy and I and others will be there. As we do so, we also remember that our broader mission at the SEC is to maintain a core facet of the great American experience that was launched 2.5 centuries ago. America's unrivaled innovative spirit and vibrant capital markets rest upon the freedoms and institutions that have long defined our republic. After all, before the United States became a nation, it was an investment, an enterprise in which the peoples of Europe shared both the risks and rewards of a new venture. Our mission of protecting investors and maintaining fair, orderly markets, therefore, carries with it a profound respect for America's founding principles and free institutions and the high price that was paid to preserve them. For those of us who work here at Station Place, we receive a daily reminder of the great national edifice built by the genius of our forebears and the sacrifice of our soldiers. Given our proximity to Capitol Hill, we can see atop the Capitol Dome the bronze Statue of Freedom. And just behind her lies Arlington, where our heroes rest in honored glory, having preserved for us the sacred fire of liberty. On this Memorial Day, and each day that we come to work in this beautiful capital city, may these shining moments and monuments bring to mind a monument more lasting than bronze, namely the immortal memory of our fallen soldiers. And may their sacrifice inspire us all to prove ourselves worthy citizens, faithful public servants, and careful stewards of the free institutions and the inheritance for which they so nobly gave their lives. So thank you all very much, and I return the podium to Adam. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Atkins. Appreciate that. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Lloyd Calderon, the chairman of the Interagency Veterans Advisory Council. Lloyd is an Air Force veteran. He works at the Small Business Administration. So he got delayed in Dallas last night when he was coming home. And so he sent us this video. Yes, I kind of pressured him to do it. He sent us this video rather than canceling, and he took it from his hotel room. So let's play the video.
Good afternoon, Chairman Atkins and guests. Due to weather conditions in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, my flight was canceled. I am still in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. However, the honor to speak to you is not lost on me, and I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words about Memorial Day. As we look at Memorial Day, it is appropriate that we think about our fallen brothers and sisters in arms. But I would encourage you to also look at the lives lived, the blessings secured by their sacrifice. Although they may have left us too soon, they also left us a legacy, one that we ought to strive to remember, and one that we ought to strive to share with others. As veterans, we come to work here to continue the mission that we started. And it's totally appropriate to say, why not dedicate our jobs, our performance, to our fallen brothers and sisters who can't do those things? Why not use our talents, our treasure, and our time to support the issues that support our veterans who are wounded, and for groups that support our survivors of veterans who have passed on. Those are all great things that we ought to be thinking about this Memorial Day. But I would offer to say that we also should encourage our young people to serve this great nation. They have you as a role model. And we had other role models that have gone before us. So now the torch is being passed to another generation of young Americans so that this great nation of ours will continue to prosper in many ways. It is a service of love and devotion that is unequaled in many areas. Thank you for the opportunity to visit with you. May your Memorial Day be a blessing. God bless you, and God bless America. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Lloyd. So now let me welcome the Veterans Committee Vice Chair, Army Reserve Lieutenant Colonel and JAG Officer Luke Pizicki to the stage. He's going to lead us in a moment of silence. So thank you all.
Thank you, Adam. At the outset, on behalf of the Veterans Committee, thank you for joining today's event. I would like to thank all of the participants who made today's event possible. Thank you, Chairman Atkins, for your remarks. Thank you to Interagency Veterans Advisory Council member Lloyd Calderon for your remarks. And let me extend a special welcome to another guest that we have here, Staff Sergeant Cassandra Mudge of the U.S. Army's JAG Corps. Staff Sergeant Mudge and I recently returned from a deployment to the Middle East, where we served together on the legal team of the Army Reserve's 103rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command in support of Operation Epic Fury. Memorial Day is a day of solemn reflection, a moment when we pause as a nation to honor the profound sacrifices that have secured our freedoms. Today, we remember the men and women who answered the call of duty and ultimately gave what President Lincoln described as the last full measure of devotion. As we prepare for a moment of silence, we hold in our hearts the memory of those who never returned home. This year, we specifically remember the service members who lost their lives during Operation Epic Fury. From the Army Reserve's 103rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command, Master Sergeant Nicole M. Amer, Sergeant Declan J. Cody, Major Cody A. Cork, Chief Warrant Officer 3, Robert M. Marzan, Major Jeffrey R. O'Brien, Master Sergeant Noah J. Tegens. On a personal note, having deployed with the 103rd Expeditionary Sustainment Command, honoring these 6 soldiers carries special meaning for me today. Continuing from the Army's 1st Space Battalion, 1st Space Brigade, Staff Sergeant Benjamin N. Pennington. From the Air National Guard's 121st Air Refueling Wing, Captain Curtis J. Angst, Captain Seth R. Koval, Master Sergeant Tyler H. Simmons. And from the Air Force's 6th Air Refueling Wing, Major John A. Klinner, Technical Sergeant Ashley B. Pruitt, and Major Ariana G. Savino. These courageous service members made the ultimate sacrifice. We honor them, their loved ones, and their friends, and we recommit ourselves to carrying forward the values they defended. We also remember those who did not return home, our wounded service members whose lives have forever been changed by their service. Their resilience and determination remind us that sacrifice takes many forms. We owe them our gratitude, our support, and our unwavering respect. Their families, too, continue to shoulder a lasting burden of service, and we honor them this Memorial Day. Let us now join together in a moment of silence to honor the fallen and the wounded. As we reflect, we remember their service, their bravery, and the enduring legacy of liberty they leave behind. Thank you for joining in this moment of remembrance. We will now turn to the video remarks by Major Ken McDonald.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Fear. I'm the Director of Operations for the SEC Veterans Committee, and I'm joined this afternoon with Mr. Ken McDonald. I know Ken from my church, and he's been gracious enough to talk with us about Memorial Day. So, Ken, I want to thank you for your service and thank you for being our primary speaker for the 2026 SEC Veterans Committee Memorial Day event. Over to you, Ken.
Well, my thanks to the 2000 SEC Veterans Committee for this invitation to speak at this Memorial Day event on the 250th anniversary of our nation's founding.
Thank you, Ken. And Ken, what branch were you in?
I was then on active duty from 1954 to 1958. Long time ago.
And was this the United States Marine Corps?
It was the United States Marine Corps. I was actually a reserve, came in as a PFC officer candidate, went to officer candidate school for 3 months, was commissioned on the anniversary of Iwo Jima landing on the 19th of February, 1955, commissioned as a second lieutenant. And from there, I went to officer basic school at Quantico. The OCS had been at Quantico as well. So I spent another 5 months at officer basic school. So I was about 7 months or 8 months at Quantico in my first year of Marine Corps service.
Thank you, Ken. And during your active duty, what were some of the things that you thought about back home?
Well, actually, once I got involved, once I was commissioned and became a platoon leader of a rifle platoon in the Alpha Company of the 3rd Marines, 3rd Marine Regiment, I didn't have much time to think about home, and I actually didn't. But the Marine Corps recognizes Memorial Day, although I understand that Memorial Day, and I remember as a kid it was called Decoration Day, and it was apparently started in 1868, not long after the Civil War. And it was a day where you put wreaths and flowers on the tombs. The Marine Corps recognizes that and respects Memorial Day, and I remember we always got the day off. But actually, in my recollection, some 75 years later, the annual commemoration of the Marine Corps birthday on the 10th of November every year was a much more important day for recognizing those Marines who had served in battles and who had been killed in them. I remember on 1957, when I was a lieutenant, I was at headquarters of the Marine Corps, and I was or actually, no, then I was, at that time, I was at headquarters of the Marine Corps, and I was called on to lead the squad of Marines in dress blues to visit the grave of every former commandant of the Marine Corps who was buried in the Washington area, and most of them were. We placed a wreath on the grave, then the rifle squad fired 3 volleys over the grave, and the bugler played taps. And we did that for all, and there were about 10, I think, former commandants that whose graves we visited. That was on Marine Corps birthday. I don't remember any such celebrations, but on Memorial Day. But I say the Marine Corps, we certainly always had the day off, and it was a day when one also always thinks of those people who have served in the military, and especially those who have given their lives in service to their country.
Well, Ken, thank you for sharing your experience, and also thank you for the history lessons on Memorial Day itself. That was informative. Ken, in closing, do you have any thoughts you'd like to share on this special year being the 250th anniversary of the United States, along with celebrations of the Marine Corps, the Army, and the Navy?
Well, it is a very special day with the 200th anniversary of so many of our institutions, including our nation itself. But the Marine Corps shares the same year, 1776. And I'm very honored to have this opportunity to talk a bit about my service on this 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and of the founding of our nation. I remember and revere all American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines who have given their lives to defend our nation.
Well, Ken, thank you so much for sharing with us, and thank you for your service.
Thank you, and it was a pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Ken. Goodbye.
All right, done and done.
So let me go off script real quick. So Mark Fear, who did that, is in the audience with us today. Thank you for doing that, Mark. We heard earlier the names of those lost in Operation Epic Fury, and their names on a paper. You probably don't know them, but they all had family, they all had friends, they all had lives that are gone. They had children that they will never see again. And so when we think about Memorial Day, that's really the message. That's the tone. That's the where the attention belongs. So now let's kind of pivot. Let's turn our attention to the panel. As they take the stage, I'm going to introduce the moderator, Jeremy Wood. So Jeremy is the Deputy Director for Applications and Architecture in the Office of Information Technology, and he served in the Air Force for about 10 years, where he deployed for Operation Provide Comfort to Iraq, I believe, as a member of the Security Forces team. And then later in his career, he reclassed to the comms computer career field, where he led various networking initiatives. So please join me in welcoming Jeremy and our distinguished panel to the stage. Also, we've got some online.
All right. So we have a few panelists. I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves and what office they work for here at the SEC, what they do, which branch of the service they represent, as well as the years they served and the deployments they were on. So I will start with you, John.
Great, thanks so much. So John Moses, and I'm an OIEA, and I was in the Navy a million years ago, although it was great hearing from folks decades before. So I was in the Navy from 2002 to the end of 2007. Had a few deployments. That was a busy time. So once on a ship at the beginning of the Iraq War, once to Iraq, and then once in various other places in the Middle East and the Horn of Africa.
Wow. Ryan?
My name is Ryan White. In the Public Affairs Office, I was in the Coast Guard from 2002. I didn't realize that was 1,000 years ago or 10,000. It didn't seem like it was that long ago. 2002 to 2011, and I was on a 210-foot cutter out of Cape May, New Jersey, and then headquarters. And yeah.
All right. And then online, we have Suzanne. Suzanne, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Suzanne Bettis. I was in the Marine Corps from 2003 to 2010. I was in 0471. I was a reservist. I participated in a mortuary affairs unit out of Smyrna, Georgia. And now I'm an attorney at NIRA.
Great.
I did deploy twice to Iraq as well, once in 2005 and another in 2007. I was in Fallujah. The first deployment, I was in Al-Assad.
Fantastic. Jeff?
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeff Abbott, and I'm part of the Human Capital Strategy Group in OHR, working on the Leadership and Organizational Effectiveness team. I was in the Coast Guard, like Ryan, for 30 years of active duty. So I graduated from the Coast Guard Academy in 1976 and retired as a captain in 2006. So I guess, John, I beat you on the age there. I think I'm the dinosaur in the group. But anyway, it's a pleasure to be here with everybody. Oh, also, I deployed to New Orleans in 2005 for Hurricane Katrina, and also to Austin, Texas for Hurricane Rita in 2005. Thank you.
All right. And Daniel?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak today. I'm Dan Griffin. I'm in the Chicago office, Division of Enforcement, the Asset Management Unit. And I've been an Army reservist since 2010. I'm still in deployments to Afghanistan and several missions in North and West Africa.
All right. So I'm going to ask our panelists a question, and that is, why is it important to ensure that we share the stories of our fallen service members and make sure that they're continued to be told today? And I'll start actually online with Jeff.
Thank you. I strongly believe that the sacrifices of all of our service members and their families, sometimes the families get overlooked, especially spouses. But our sailors, our soldiers, our airmen and women, our Marines, our Coast Guard men and women, forgotten and should forever be honored. One of the privileges I had while on active duty was to serve as the senior officer of a funeral detail for the burial of a Coast Guard veteran in Arlington National Cemetery. It is a very solemn and respectful affair with the honor guard, the horse-drawn caisson that carried the casket, the rifle detail firing the salute to our comrade, the folding of the American flag that was on the casket, and then the presentation I made of the flag to the widow. I will never forget that day. Just each of us has an opportunity to participate in an organization called Wreaths Across America during the holiday season, and to lay a wreath at the grave sites of service members at our national cemeteries all across the country. I had the privilege of placing a wreath on the grave site of a good friend and Coast Guard Academy classmate. It is very, very meaningful, and I highly encourage you to consider volunteering for this event. And also think about possibly taking your family members as well. I'm sure you'll find it to be very meaningful and memorable, as I did. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Ryan?
Well, I'm in the public affairs office, and in the Coast Guard, I was a public affairs officer, so I think I gravitate towards the storytelling part of the services, and so much of what happens every day in each service is behind the scenes, out of view of the public, and a lot of what we know today as legendary events happen because somebody recorded it or talked about it, and then that story carried on, and this is our opportunity to do that for people who are working every day and sacrificed in that work. So that process of sharing those stories, that's how you find out about what people are doing in the Marine Corps or Air Force or Army or Navy, or did I leave any out? Coast Guard, I don't.
Space Force.
Space Force. So, that's the opportunity for that to happen. And if you don't do that, or if you're not kind of passing on those stories, reading those books, watching those movies, whatever it is, those kind of stories could die. And they don't die because we continue on with the storytelling.
Fantastic. Daniel.
So when I deployed to Afghanistan in 2012, I was at the 82nd Airborne, and we lost 9 soldiers that were killed in action. So to most people, I think Memorial Day is this day where they honor the service of people, but these are nameless and faceless people. But to me, they're not nameless and faceless. I knew their names, I knew their faces, I knew these people. And like as we talked about, they had friends and families, and they had their whole lives ahead of them, and they sacrificed all of it for our country. So it's kind of my way to remember them, is to honor them, and in my own way kind of say thank you. And there was actually a book written about my unit's deployment, and it talks about these 9 service members. It's called The Brave Ones by Michael McLeod. It's an excellent book, really pays tribute to these 9 service members who paid the ultimate sacrifice for their country. And so just kind of my way of saying thank you, to tell their stories.
All right. Suzanne, do you have anything to add for that question?
Yeah, I'll say, the military has a lot of acronyms and sayings, and I think the one that rings true for this specific question is, service members in the military, we generally say that a person dies twice, once on the battlefield and a second time when their name is spoken for the last time. So by telling these stories, we kind of keep that second death at bay. And their stories are essentially like the interest we paid for the freedom we continue to enjoy. And just remembering it's not just about the past, it's really about just acknowledging the price paid for the present and what's going to move us continually into the future.
Oh, well said. John, did you have anything to add for this question?
I don't think I can do better than what was said.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're trying to hold it together. Well, the next question I have from our panelists, and I'll start with Daniel, is what makes the people we honor on this day special to you?
So again, when I was in Afghanistan in 2012, when one of those 9 service members was killed, we were on a really small base up in the mountains near the border of Pakistan. And when that service member was going to be transported from our base, our small base, a helicopter would have to come in, and all the people on our base would kind of line up across from each other on the airfield. And the service member's remains would be taken on a stretcher kind of past each service member. And there's a ceremony, it's called a ramp ceremony, where each soldier would render a salute, a slow salute. It's a very somber ceremony that I took part in, and then their remains were, taken back stateside. And I think it's important for people to know the dignity that each of these people were shown after they left the battlefield. And I think it's important that they know that, so we continue to treat their service with dignity and the respect that it deserves.
Yeah, and on that, Suzanne, if you could share a bit about your time in the mortuary services.
Yeah, so just to follow up with what Daniel said, so I'll give you kind of a quick rundown of what happens when someone dies or is killed in action. We get a notification, and sometimes they come to us through the medical unit. Sometimes we have to go out on search and recovery missions. I've driven out into the desert to recover fallen, Marines, sailors, airmen before. And what happens is we give them a code name. We call them angels. So when a Marine, soldier, sailor falls, we don't call them fallen angels because that connotation just didn't go over well. We just say, we have 1 or 2, or unfortunately sometimes 9 or 14 angels. And what happens is they get transferred back to the base, either, by their unit, or they come from us through surgical. And what happens next is really, really interesting. So we often look for the dog tags of that service member to see what their religion was. And before anyone is able to touch those remains, we call either a rabbi, we call the priest that's on base, whatever their religious denomination was, we call someone to pray over them before we touch them. And then after that, what happens next is the doctor from surgical pronounces them. And we have a team, our mortuary affairs team, we have a set of Marines that then has to do the solemn duty of going through their pockets and notarizing documents indicating what injuries they have from head to toe. So we're going through their pockets and finding letters from their moms and wives, taking off and inventorying watches and wedding rings. And we have to read through all these things. So you really become a part of learning about what this service member, who they were. And then just to kind of follow up on the ramp ceremonies, once we prepare them and all of their effects to go back home, it's a 45-hour time limit, and we tentatively identify them, and we put them in a transfer case, which is essentially the casket they go into. We lay the flag over them with the blue side and stripes essentially over their left side, face and heart, and the stripes going down towards their feet. And as we do the ramp ceremony, when we load them into the vehicle, we always load them feet first, like they are still walking with us. And we spin the case, so when they have to come out, they are always continually walking forward with us. The ramp ceremony is usually attended by their unit members or whoever happens to be on the flight line at the time. and we slowly do a small procession into the plane. Everybody renders a slow salute, and we spin them again once they are loaded on the plane. We spin them so they're facing feet first, so they're always traveling forward home. And then they're taken to Dover Air Force Base, and that's where they do their positive identification of that service member.
Wow, it's very powerful. Anyone else have something they'd like to share that makes us honor our people on this special day?
Yeah, there's
Sure.
thinking about a couple threads that you brought up, Ryan. You talked about stories and not having the last time, not letting there be a last time that the fallen's name is spoken. One of the ways that we do this as a country for, obviously for just a small subset of the fallen is naming ships, U.S. vessels after the fallen. So on Memorial Day, I try to think about two, over the years I've tried to think about two specific service members to not lose them in the many folks that have fallen, many service members that have fallen. So I mentioned I was on a ship first, so I was on the USS Pearl Harbor, and it's really special to go into Pearl Harbor, to port in Hawaii on the Pearl Harbor. If you go there, you should see they have these big ceremonial leis that they put on the bow of the ship. But you probably would have seen or know about the USS Arizona, right? So there's over 1,100 sailors and Marines entombed on the Arizona. But a lot of people fought in that battle, and one of them was a petty officer named Dory Miller. So if you've seen the movie Pearl Harbor, this is the character that's sort of dramatized by Cuba Gooding Jr. And so he takes up an anti-aircraft position. He was like a messmate, but he takes up this anti-aircraft position, does lots of other heroic things, downs one or more planes, saves a lot of people. But he goes on to another ship, and on that next ship, he's at the Battle of Macon in the South Pacific. So this is like midway between Hawaii and New Guinea. And he's one of about 700 sailors who then die when their ship is hit by an enemy torpedo. And they're actually working on a second ship. There was a ship named after him in the 70s. There's another ship that's going to be named after him. It is an aircraft carrier. It's going to be CVN-81, a Ford-class carrier. So a massive, $13 billion, 1,000-foot ship that should be commissioned in the 2030s. Another thing that we talked about was people, leaving too soon. A lot of these people are really young. He was 24. Another 24-year-old that I try to think about on Memorial Day, he died when he was 24, was Coast Guardsman, Petty Officer Nathan Brukenthal, who died at the oil facility that I was assigned to in Iraq. And so he dies in this coordinated terrorist attack along with two sailors. And he was the first Coast Guardsman to die in combat since Vietnam. We had a little memorial for him on the facility, and it was really always touching to me the way that the Iraqi civilians would pay their respects to his memory and to the service he did in defending them. And he also has a Coast Guard, a fast response cutter named after him. So obviously that's not the case for everyone that's fallen, but those are two particular people whose names I'm glad continue to be spoken and who I try to think about on Memorial Day.
Jeff, did you have something to add?
Just very briefly, this fall, our Coast Guard Academy class celebrates their 50th reunion. So 50 years ago, we graduated. And part of our celebration includes a memorial service at the Academy Chapel to remember and pay tribute to our classmates who have what we call crossed the bar, who have died. I wrote 4 memorials for members of my class. And to come back to Daniel's point, is these are people that oftentimes. Many times they are not, most of the time. But one was killed after only being at the academy for 3 months in a tragic motorcycle accident. One is a good friend that I served with in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Another good friend who served 24 years on active duty He fought courageously through 4 bouts with cancer. And then Chris White, and he was the best man at our wedding in the same chapel where we're going to have the memorial service. So each one was special and each one was cherished. Thank you.
Time check with Adam real quick, make sure. 48 seconds. Look at that. Oh,
It's 12:48.
12:48. All right. Well, we're going to lighten the mood a little bit and ask a question related to this year. So, any thoughts on the 250th anniversary of America, the Marines, the Army, or the Navy? And I'm going to start with Ryan, knowing it's going to be spicy.
Well, it is. I did a little bit of work, a little bit of extra work today, de minimis work, looking up stuff about the Navy, and I did that before realizing that you were going to talk about a Coast Guardsman, so I kind of feel bad, but not that bad. So we're talking about the 250th anniversary of the 250th birthday of the Navy, and Jeff probably can say this too. There's, I don't want to say rivalry.
Rivalry is a good word.
But between the Coast Guard and the Navy, and one of the things that we tend to say is the Coast Guard is the oldest continuous seagoing service. And that continuous part is, I think, just a very friendly way of giving a nod to the Navy, but in reality, I don't think we should say continuous. I think it should say the Coast Guard is the oldest seagoing service in the U.S. And why? Because 250 years, that's pretty long. Well, the Continental Navy was created in 1775. And if we're doing math, that's 250, well, math. Somebody do math. Disbanded in 1785. All the ships were destroyed. Everyone sent home. No more Continental Navy. 1785. All right, 1790. The U.S. Revenue Marine, the U.S. Revenue Cutter Service, which would one day become the U.S. Coast Guard, was created on August 4th, 1790. And it wasn't until 1794 that Congress created the U.S. Navy, and it wasn't until 1798 until there were actual ships being built for the U.S. Navy. So, Continental Navy, 1775, U.S. Navy, 1794, 1798. We can argue about why that was changed. Well, we know why it was changed, because in 1972, Admiral Zumwalt said that he reimagined, they don't say reimagined, but I imagine that's what it was. He reimagined the birthday of the Navy as being October 13th, 1775, and the reason that they did that was to enhance the appreciation of Navy heritage. We're a disclosure agency, and we want to have fair and accurate disclosures, and we just need to be sure that people understand that 1775 and 1794 are not the same distance from 2026. But happy birthday to the Navy anyway.
So thank you all for indulging him. He's been waiting centuries to do that. Maybe the thing that comes, first of all, you should Google USS Zumwalt. It's and then put it up against any of these Coast Guard vessels that you have. It's quite the ship. So the thing that comes to mind. So just Saturday, the Ford. I mentioned that that they're going to name a ship after Dory Miller. It's a Ford class ship. The Ford returned to port after 11 months at Venezuela, Epic Fury. It's a long time to be away from home. They got a presidential unit citation. It's a very big deal. And I was just thinking about how overall this time the technologies have changed a lot. There's all kinds of different people. The country's a lot bigger. It's changed a lot. But there's these traditions that are this through line from the beginning, whenever you consider it to be, until now. And the service, right? As you say when you're in the military, right? That's why they call it the service. And those selfless sacrifices persist through that entire history.
Yeah.
That was very diplomatic. Thank you for taking the high road.
I was in the Air Force, so I stay out of that. We're very, very, very young, and the Space Force is probably not even present in this room. They're still so young. So, Daniel, did you have anything to add on the thoughts for this year?
So I come from a military family. My father served in the Marines in Vietnam. Both of my grandfathers served in World War II. I actually have one of my grandfather's helmets from the beaches of Normandy. You probably can't see it, but there's a bullet hole through there. He got the Silver Star and Purple Heart. My wife's father, grandfather, grandmother were all in the military. So my family's service goes back decades. But when I reflect on the 250th year, really, there's been people willing to put on the uniform for 250 years to protect our country. Army, 251 years, 1775. But just feel very lucky that there have been people through the generations willing to make this sacrifice. And my father actually had an uncle who was his plane was shot down in World War II, and he was killed in action. But lots of families have these stories, but it goes back to our founding, where people were willing to serve and sacrifice for our country.
Absolutely. Suzanne?
Oh, wow. Well, the best, save the best for well, Jeffrey's still there, but we know the best branch. In November 10th, 1775, my Marine Corps came alive. That's just what it is. So, the weapons may change, the uniform may change slightly. Of course, our dress blues are something that has been unchanged and a beautiful representation of the Marine Corps. But the Marine that stands in them doesn't change. The spirit of that person doesn't change. And I think the 250 years is just a testament to that special kind of person that's willing to put themselves in that position to run towards chaos when everybody else isn't. So others just really don't have to. And I think, especially being in mortuary affairs, I think of like the 250th anniversary of this country as, built on those fallen sailors, soldiers, airmen, Marine that have been escorted home. And the next generation of those service members being able to be part of that proud chain of service, understanding that service also possibly can come with the ultimate sacrifice, and they continue to stand steadfast in their service.
Absolutely. Jeff?
Hey, just briefly, first off, happy birthday to the Army, Navy, and Marines. Big event, absolutely. And most people know, I know Suzanne knows this, many people do not, but the Marines and the Coast Guard have a common adversary, I think, as Rand put it. And that happens not to be a foreign adversary, but it's the Navy. we have a lot of fun with that. Sorry, John. But seriously, the Coast Guard, because it's so small, really partners with all the agencies. Many people don't realize Coast Guard is in like 108 different countries. It's not just the U.S. coast. But we could not do what we do without close ties to the Navy, Air Force, Army, Marines. I don't know about Space Command yet, to be determined. But it's interesting because the Marine Corps actually celebrates the birthday of a Coast Guardsman. And this is Douglas Monroe, who during World War II, he was on a landing craft. The Marines were landing on Guadalcanal, and the intelligence report apparently was not accurate. There were many more Japanese there, and the Marines were getting chewed up. So we had to evacuate the Marines off of that particular beach. And they were getting beaten up pretty bad. What Monroe did was he put his landing craft boat and he manned the machine gun in between him and the fleeing Marines, and it took all the Japanese fire. And he got mortally wounded. And his last words were, "Did they get off?" From the Marines. And he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. But that just shows the closeness between the different services. So thanks to all the veterans and those who have fallen before us. Thank you.
I think the closeness amongst the services is why we can poke at each other a little bit and have those rivalries that are friendly in nature. All right, but we want to thank the Veterans Committee for this opportunity to speak a bit about our thoughts and our feelings on this important day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Great job, guys. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for those of you online. You know, what you just heard really is, you know, this wave of emotions. And on Memorial Day, we have that. And, you know, it's very consistent with today's theme, right? We've talked about a legacy of service in sacrifice. And so today on Memorial Day, for those of you who don't know, you saw it in the SEC today, the flags fly at half staff until noon. And that's when we remember the fallen and we have that somber reflection. But then at noon, the flags are raised at full staff. And that's to really think about the resolve that America has for continuing to defend freedom, to honor those who have survived and who are living to carry on that legacy. So when I think of the panel and reflect on what we just heard, I really heard a number of courageous Americans who have dedicated their lives to serving the American public and serving the American way of life, not once, but twice. And so now we're going to kind of pivot again. So joining us on stage is Keith Cassidy. He's going to take us into the 250th birthday of a few of the military services, lead us in a cake cutting. So join me in welcoming the SEC's very own Director of the Division of Examinations, a Lieutenant Colonel of Marines, and our Senior Executive Advisor, Keith Cassidy.
Thank you, Adam. It's a humbling experience to be here with all of you to observe Memorial Day as we near the 250th founding of this great nation. I'm privileged to be part of the veterans community here at the SEC, and I wanted to congratulate the Veterans Committee on the first in-person large event since the pandemic. And it's wonderful to be here with all of you. I also wanted to thank the chairman, the panelists, and speakers for sharing your thoughts and experiences, as well as the leadership team of the committee for organizing this outstanding event. Reflecting on Memorial Day, it's a holiday that is observed collectively, but can be deeply personal for those directly affected by the sacrifice of the brave men and women who gave all they had. So then, rather than trying to bridge the divide between the collective and the personal, I will leave you with the immortal words of our 16th president. It is for us, the living, rather to be dedicated here to the unfinished work which they have thus far so nobly carried on. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that cause for which they have gave the last full devotion, that we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. So with those words ringing in our ears, please join us in the Veterans Hall for a celebration of the 250th birthday of the Army, the Navy, and our blessed Marine Corps. Hurrah.